It's only the Allianz Leagues. It's only February. Only a warm-up. Only a relegation. Only a bit of fun. It's only a debut. Only hundreds of competitive matches and thousands of players giving it their all. Only an unstoppable passion for GA across the whole nation. It's only 30 years of Allianz supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues. Only the Allianz Leagues.
A grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads. There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to England, and now they're really rolling. And I can tell you, there won't be a cow milk from County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Allianz Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville and by Ciarán Sheehan, the former Cork footballer. We will be talking about matches across all four divisions of the Allianz National League. We will be asking what it is like at this stage of a league campaign when the whole thing is unravelling for a team. And we will be asking also what it is now like to play as a corner forward in modern Gaelic football. But I want to start with the decision last week of a Gaelic football team to decline to play in the final of a national competition. A match report was posted on the Dundalk Institute of Technology website last Wednesday, which talked of a monumental team effort in a brutal storm down in Limerick to beat TUS Midwest to reach the final of the Trench Cup. That match report celebrated the achievement of those players. For those who don't know it, by the way, the competition that we're playing in the Trench Cup is the secondary competition for colleges, inter-college Gaelic football, the secondary that is to the Sigerson Cup. Now, the final line of that match report reads, the DKIT boys will now face GMIT in the final, date TBC. Oisín, what happened next?
Well, I suppose the forerunner for all this was that, we had spotted the date for the competition probably a month, 5 weeks ago. Realizing it was a National League weekend, we flagged it up straight away.
You're the manager of the Dundalk team.
Sorry, I'm the manager. Yeah. So we as I say, we had flagged it up because the National League weekend. It definitely wasn't going to work for us because the final was down for 5:30 in Carlow on Saturday, which coincided with Armagh Monaghan in the National League, and we had three players who are playing with Monaghan. Niall Cairns, Shane Hanratty and Gary Mohan. They had all played. I think Gary and Niall had played the whole of the first two National League games, and Shane Hanratty, I think, probably about 40 or 50 minutes. So it was a good chance that we're all going to be involved. That wasn't even taking into account the fact that we have 6 lads on the loud panel, but. We, as I say, we had flagged it up. We weren't getting anywhere with it. And 2 weeks before we were supposed to play, a week before we were supposed to play in the semi-final, because it's okay arguing about these things, but until you're in that position, people are thinking, well, hold on a second, you're not even there yet. So we that's not even a problem as such. So we won the quarter-final. We were down to play on the Friday, so we had a serious problem with that because we weren't going to be able to play Friday and Saturday. And it had been pulled back to the Wednesday. So as a result of us wanting that change in fixture, we had to, for a neutral venue, we had to then travel to Limerick, which brings on its own issues for lads, weather considerations, college considerations, the lads who were unavailable because they couldn't get out of class, all that sort of thing. And then, we presumed after we played the game on the Wednesday that there would be a change of heart, that we would find some sort of compromise. That compromise never came to fruition. And anybody who knows college football and the way college football works, the chairman of the GAA club within the college is a student, secretary is a student, the treasurer is a student. It's run by students. It gives them huge experience in all areas of the GAA, administration, playing, organisation, all those sort of things. So the players, we had requested on the Wednesday on the way home from Limerick, a change of time for the game. We never understood why there was a differentiation between what was going on at Seakerson level and Fitzgibbon level and what was going on at Trench level. And the first thing people will say is because there's not as many players involved. I don't think it matters, the number of players. I think if you're affecting one or two players, there should be they should be facilitated. You can't play, regardless of any of this, Paul. You can't play. Lads can't be expected to play 3 games in 4 days. Doesn't happen in professional sport. You think of all the challenges that these lads have at this stage. So that's why we felt very, very strongly about it. But once we realised that there was no give, we got an email back pretty quickly on Wednesday to say that there was no give, that it wasn't going to be changed, and then it was down to the players. Players put up a poll on the group and said, do we want to go and play without our teammates that we've played with all year, or do we want to pull out? And to a man, there wasn't one person who wanted to play. Everybody wanted to wait.
So did you communicate that then to the people who run it, that you were pulling out on the Wednesday or the Thursday?
Thursday we told them we were pulling out.
And what was the reaction?
There was no reaction. We still haven't heard anything back.
You haven't heard anything back since last Thursday?
No, not a word. And I think.
What do you think about that?
I think it's incredible, and I think some of the criticism that has been thrown at our boys is that as a college is that we were holding the GAA to ransom. Now anybody who knows anything about ransom will know that you have to have a hostage. In a ransom situation, we had no hostage, Paul, because we were under no illusions when we got that email back on the Wednesday that if we didn't show up for the game, there was going to be no alternative date. There was going to be no compromise. So that was all. The players knew, they were aware of that information before they took that decision. They took the vote on the Thursday, and then we informed the higher education authority. So
any communication with GMIT?
Our development officer and their development officer spoke, and they wanted to go ahead with the game on the Friday. We said we weren't in the position to do that. So again, anybody who knows, I genuinely feel for GMIT because I'm pretty sure all those lads wanted to play in a national final, but our players felt their hands were tied. So that's the way they went about things. And
does this really matter in any, or is this just a secondary competition? Does it really matter that this final isn't played?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter to anybody else other than the people involved. And that's the thing. And one of the things I said last week was, if this is the way that this is true, like one of the things that everybody is just waiting. Everybody's waiting and see how the Tailteann Cup and how those teams in Division 3 and Division 4 are treated over the next 6 months, because it's a massive thing within the GAA. I mean, there's a lot of knees that have been bent in order to make this happen. There's been a lot of promises made, and at this stage, I would be, having had the experience that we have had in the last 7 days, I would be very fearful for anybody in the Tailteann Cup, because if that's the way that treats second tier competitions, then there is very little regard for them, and I'd be worried for the Tailteann Cup at this stage.
Do you think there's any prospect of this final being played either later this week or later the following week?
No. No, because it would take a willingness from everybody. I think, as I say, when we made the decision, we weren't holding anybody to ransom, because we were aware in no uncertain terms that there was no bending in the knee from anybody. So we were aware that for us to forfeit the game would mean that we forfeited the Trench Cup.
We'll go and talk about the Allianz leagues now. It is, I have to say, somewhat depressing, extremely disappointing that a national competition should end like that. But if we turn to the national leagues for a minute, Ciarán, Cork against Derry. You watched Cork against Derry in Division 2 of the National Football League.
Yeah, I did. And it wasn't exactly, I wasn't sitting at the edge of my seat. It was frustrating from a Cork person's point of view watching the game. It was, look, I suppose looking
They were hammered.
Stepping back, yeah, they were hammered. They were totally outplayed from everywhere on the pitch. It just looked like a team that was lost. They made the trip up to Derry. Conditions weren't great. It looked like they just didn't play with any kind of abandon. There was no kind of ruthlessness. What I would say is it's very, very hard to be intense, dogged, play a high pressure game when there isn't a set structure in place. I'm sure that this is something that Keith Ricken is working with the lads. But it was very hard to see what type of game style they were playing on the weekend or yesterday against Derry. On the flip side, I thought Derry were impressive. And I know they're a team that people have been kind of talking about over the last kind of couple of years as a team that were coming. But if we're talking purely about Cork's performance, yeah, it was just a very tough day at the office. It's hard to see, where the improvement's going to come from. Yes, there's a lot of youth. There's a lot of kind of, I suppose, trial and error going on at the moment there. But at the same time, you need to formulate some sort of a structure that's going to win you games, and that doesn't seem to be there at the minute.
They didn't look like they were going to score more than 7 points. In fact, there were periods where they didn't look like they were even going to score 7 points. And it's not obvious who is going to score for Cork and the rest of the league.
I've said this. I think I mentioned this, Paul, before around the best form of attack is a good defensive structure, and in my opinion, and at the moment, Cork just seem to be lost in terms of defence. There's no strategy around where you turn over the ball, how we break forward, how we regain our shape. Kerry, I think Kerry are the best example of it. They play this lovely free-flowing football, and they have done for it's their game style, but they have tweaked their defense in the last couple of years, and they've just become so much more solid. They're turning over the ball in the right positions. They're attacking in numbers. Maybe it is the fact that maybe Cork are lacking a bit of pace. Sean Powter is about the only guy I would say that would have elite speed in the team. You need your halfbacks and even your cornerbacks now need to be, have serious pace at this level. But I just think that defensively, you saw from I suppose Cork had a goal chance, Stephen Sherlock had a goal chance, missed keeper saved it, Derry went down and scored the goal, but it was the easiest transition you'll ever see in a game. It was, through the lines, 1-2s, there wasn't a finger laid on any Derry player, and yeah, look, it's frustrating. In a good solid defensive structure, it's a bit like Dublin. You're seeing it a bit with Dublin at the moment. It's just the layers of defense aren't there. And as soon as the ball is turned over, it's 1-2, you're down the end of the pitch, it's a goal. And it's very unlike Dublin, for example. But Cork just need to, in my opinion, I would say, workshops around defensive structure for the next, number of weeks. It's difficult because you're trying to get fellas up to the pitch physically as well. Cork don't seem to be there. But again, it's a young group. They're taking their time with it. But at the moment, they just don't have that time. They're in real kind of dangerous territory at the moment in terms of staying in Division 3 or staying in Division 2.
They have 1 point from 3 matches. They play Galway next weekend, and Galway and Derry look to be the best 2 teams in Division 2. You wouldn't, obviously, it's not, you're not conceding the match, but you wouldn't want to hang your hat on Cork beating Galway next weekend, which leaves them with 3 games to survive in Division 2. I mean, promotion to Division 1 is utterly out of the question. I think what struck me most about yesterday was every time a Cork player was one-on-one with a Derry player, they were beaten. Either Derry were able to take the ball by them, or Cork were not able to take the ball by a Derry player. So there was a huge difference in strength and conditioning. I thought there was a huge difference in skill level. I thought Derry were just much more comfortable on the ball than Cork, where now that can be a product of fitness as well. I get that, but like time and again, I thought Cork were found wanting, and it's you made a really good point there at the start as well. It's not obvious where the fix is coming from here. You're involved with the under-20s, is that right? Are there players coming through there?
There are. I am involved in the 20s, and there's great talent in Cork. There's always been good talent in Cork. I don't think that's the question that needs to be answered. Is how do we set up a solid structure or game style? Like, I'm not sure the Cork players know what their identity is in terms of their game plan, their structure. Like, what I'd say is the group of guys that are there, I've experienced and played with a lot of them, and the character, I wouldn't question their character for 1 minute. But it's very, as I said before, it's very difficult when you're working hard and you're trying, but there's no real structure and there's no real, like, I've been in teams where, you know, you're chasing a man down, but you get lost and you end up, you know, running around after him, doing 3 circles instead of 1 line of defense. Like, you're almost, your GPS numbers are through the roof, and yet you're getting hammered by, you know, teams that you shouldn't be getting hammered by. And what I'm saying is that it's blatantly obvious to me, and I'm sure, look, I've no question, I've worked with Keith Ricken for a long time. He's a good friend of mine, right up through college, from under 16 level with Cork. I had him as a coach, and he knows his stuff, really knows his stuff. I have no doubt that he's working on that at the moment, but my opinion, we need to start winning games, and we need to start winning games fast, because the Cork people need it, the players need it, everyone that's around the group needs it. The Cork 20 team need it. They need to see that the senior team are winning games.
Is it a mistake that older your cohort of players are essentially gone from the team? Is that a mistake?
What do you mean specifically? Do you mean that I suppose there's probably 2 generations are gone? Like, would you think? I suppose what I would say is, I know that Cork tried hard to hang on to the likes of Mark Collins this year, because he would have added a huge amount to this team. Look, a player makes a decision and it's time to go. It's time to go for them, for whatever reason that is. But there comes a point where you do have to totally, you know, just rejig the whole thing and go at it. But you do have to tread very lightly around who you let go, who you leave in. There's enough experience in this team. There's Brian Hurley, Matty Taylor, Ian Maguire. There's a lot of guys that have been around for, you know, a long period of time now. They probably haven't been, I suppose, they haven't achieved as much as they would have liked to have achieved over their time in a red jersey, but they're still hungry for success.
Would you have Luke Connolly in the team?
I would. I don't know what the situation is there, but I certainly would, just for his creativity alone. I think every team needs a player like Luke. But again, it depends on what the game style is. It depends on what they've decided that, you know, where he fits, where he doesn't fit. But in my opinion, I think he's a super footballer. I think he adds an X factor. I do think that if he improved his fitness by, you know, another couple of percent, he'd be, you know, top level player in the country. But he had been hampered by injury and a few other things that have impacted him. But yeah, the likes of Luke, the likes of I suppose Rory Dean had a bit of X factor about him, carrying the ball, things like that. But I think there's a balancing act to get to play there. I know Keith was involved with the under-20s over the last number of years. He knows a lot of these guys. He has faith in them. It does take a couple of years to embed and step up, but we're just not seeing that yet at the moment. But as you said there earlier, Paul, it is a bit worrying. We need to start winning games, and that's the bottom line.
Oisín, how do you turn a thing around when a team is struggling? Cork have 1 point from 3 matches. Across the leagues, there are teams that have yet to win matches. What happens in the middle of a campaign when that starts happening?
Well, can I go back a bit, Paul? Just in, like, when you look at Derry and Cork, Derry are probably Cork 3 years ago. That's the way I feel about it. And when Rory Gallagher went in, we spoke to Rory Gallagher last year, and he said He was aware of the size of the challenge that he was going into, and then he said, actually, when I went in there and I thought I knew what the size of the challenge was, I was way off. It was way bigger than that. I think the challenge in Cork is way bigger than that. I think first thing that happened in Derry was that they rallied the troops, ex-players. They went about financing it and realizing that they could do that. They sought a lot of counsel from other counties who had, done a rebuild in the past, including Dublin. I remember being at an event one night where, they talked about, the challenges that they were going to have ahead of them. But one thing Rory Gallagher said, that there could be an immediate improvement in the way they played, the way they were structured, and I would say that was something that happened within 6 months. That they looked a lot more difficult to break down. They transitioned the ball as well as anybody else. I still think that they may end up a little bit late up front in that Shane McGuigan is carrying a lot of that can. I know Lachlan has come back.
Oh, he's brilliant though, isn't he? He's brilliant.
Yeah. And also yesterday they had no Ciarán McFall, so that will strengthen them up, and I think there's a few more players to come back as well. So if you consider the rebuild that they have done in a fairly short period of time, the first thing that they seen value in outside of the actual football pitch was to rally the troops, to get some feel-good factor back into Derry football, to get the best players in Derry into the changing room. I think for a lot of teams, that is a huge challenge when you're down to divisions. But like, I've been critical a long time about Cork. When Cork won the All-Ireland in 2010, I went on record in saying this looks like a team and a county that could dominate Gaelic football for the next 5 or 6 years. And it really has been a downward spiral since. And one of the things that when I look into Cork, I look at the joined up thinking, and I don't think there's enough joined up thinking. When you consider people always throw out, the amount of clubs and all out there and the amount of personnel, but like that has its own challenges logistically. How you get the best out of all of those clubs that you have, and but there has to be some sort of striving towards doing that, and I just think that Cork in the last 12 years have not been able to harness the talent that they have. I think fitness-wise, yesterday they looked off it. Strength and conditioning-wise, they looked off it. I think they're a good bit behind the curve. I've always said that they need somebody from outside to come in and give them just a bit of an idea of what other counties are doing, in order to get to where they are, and they're a good bit behind the curve. I think yesterday you looked at two teams. One team who you felt as if knew you knew the game play by play almost, and like sometimes maybe even too orchestrated. But Cork, just like Ciarán said, just didn't. You just never felt you knew what was happening from one play to the next, and how slow the transition is incredible. It's incredible how lackluster that is.
It's interesting to watch Derry play. I went to see Offaly play Derry 2 weeks ago in Tullamore, and Derry were class apart. They were way better than Offaly on the day, and they were really, really well coached. They had players. They even into the wind, into a gale blowing down the wind in the second half. They kept 4 players wide up top. They were trying to stretch Offaly at all times. They were trying to get Offaly in one-on-ones. You could see that everywhere. Actually, Rory Gallagher never stopped. I was up behind him, during the game. He never stopped coaching them from the start of the game to the end. And I have to say, I would definitely want to play on the opposite side of the field if I was on his team. Actually, the other thing is, there was a couple. People were left with very little to shout about, but there was a bit of barracking going on where people, well, a couple of people were telling Rory Gallagher that he'd win nothing unless he got Jimmy McGuinness in beside him. That's all. That's all awfully people we're left with. But for all that I say he was kind of overcoached, everything he said was a clear instruction, and it was a good instruction. You could see what was happening, and that is the product of work. And they also, by the way, look like a team who have trained over the last 2 years and trained, and it's not absolutely clear that they took too many breaks, because they have come on massively during this time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just to cut in, Paul, just on even just the minors who've come through from last year. It's incredible how, like, they must have sat on them, lived in the gym, because how they have developed even physically in a matter of 6 or 8 months is incredible.
I want to look though specifically at this issue of teams that are struggling to score. We'll be coming back to defence in a little bit, but Offaly never looked like they were going to score more than 6 or 7 points against Derry. Cork exactly the same, and through the leagues there were teams scoring. What is it that's happening here? Is it that they don't have the forwards, or is it a simple matter of structure? Ciarán.
As you said, the role of a forward has changed so much and evolved so much in the last number of years. Like when you look at the full forward line, for example, I was looking at Cork's full forward line yesterday, and I watched the Dublin Mayo game, and not to go into that, I know we're going to talk about that later, but I was just looking at the difference, and I was comparing it. I was watching it through the eyes of that game previously, and I was just, a lot of the scores in the Dublin Mayo game came from loop runs or cut runs. By cut runs, I mean, you're showing for the ball and you double back in behind the man, or you, like, before, they weren't really a thing. You saw it in a game maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Wow, great movement. I think Gooch used to do it kind of all the time, those little cut kind of runs. But they've become so important now for teams. I think for Stephen Sherlock's chance at goal, actually, that's one example of the game yesterday I could think of, and one and only example where I could see that. And I just think that across the pitch yesterday, and Derry did a number of times where it gets frustrating being inside. You come out, you end up kind of chewing up space around the half forward line, the top of the D. There's no kind of real energy coming through the middle. You don't know where to go. Like, you need to start either hug the touchline or get out. Like, you need to make a meaningful run. Yesterday, it just looked like it was mundane. Fellas were getting the ball, they were hand passing it back, they were hand passing back again. Whereas showing for the ball in a simple cut run or a loop ball, it opens the whole thing up. And at the moment, it seems to be blocked everywhere in every game. But I just saw Mayo and Dublin less so. Mayo did an awful lot of it, where cornerbacks, I mentioned it earlier, cornerbacks are quick now, very, very quick. So it's hard to get a straight line run away from them. So you're running out, you're doubling back, you're looking to check them, you're potentially using a bit more body work to push them off, to get a bit of space. And that's it just has to be done. As your modern day corner forward, you need to look at, evolving your craft. It's not as simple as run out, get the ball, turn, pop it over the bar. It's not that easy anymore.
If you look at the very first score that Mayo got against Dublin, it was clearly a set play. The ball's thrown in, Diarmuid O'Connor leaves the side and cuts through, and it was on his own. And he was absolutely on his own. If the pass had been slightly better, there was a goal on. How much of attacking play now at elite Gaelic football level is set plays?
I would say a lot. I would say an awful lot. Like, I just think at the moment it's easy to scenario plan. Teams are spending more and more time together now. They're running through scenarios like we saw from the All Ireland final. Was it a couple of years ago with Dublin's goal, Dean Rock's goal in the first minute.
James McCarthy coming, yeah.
Yeah. and how the whole thing just opened up. That was a set play, clearly a set play. They had planned that. And
Merchant's goal against Kerry in the replay, clearly a set play where he comes through.
Clearly a set play. Like the way I look at it at the moment, there's slow plays, there's fast plays. It's like with kickouts. So you've a free in, you're setting up your structure. When there's a free in, it's a slow play. The ball's going to be dead. It's going to be put over the bar or it's going to be put wide. And then you have your fast play where it's a turnover and how you set up. It's a bit like that. Like when there's an opportunity to set up, reset, you do that. Or if there's an opportunity for a sideline ball in your front half, that you've direct runs, you know where you're creating space, you know where you want the ball. Most teams want the ball at that top of the D space, but like it can only happen if everyone knows what's going on, because often you just yesterday you just saw so much. I'm going to come back to the Cork there again because I looked at it quite closely, but there was so much bunching going on in that kind of middle zone. Guys just trotting through, not really aware of what space was around them. And it just chewed up the whole thing. Whereas Dublin Mayo hugged the touchlines, leave that space. Dublin kind of started to create that, 5 years ago, where they really hugged the touchlines and they just left that wide open. Mayo did it excellently yesterday, where they just hugged the touchlines, they left the gaps, guys ran through. And when the ball was slowed down, it was a set play. It was clear that Ryan O'Donoghue and even when you look at the likes of like
Norman,
but I'm just thinking of likes of Conor Callahan for Dublin, right? He's out at the moment, obviously, but he is excellent at that, like really, really good at creating space. And it's probably everyone's talking about his scoring ability, his strength, his power, but he is very, very good. He's very aware of where he is on the pitch. He creates that space for loads of other players, likes of Ciarán Sheehan, likes of your finishers who get on the ball, Dean Rock. And it's certainly rehearsed. It's certainly rehearsed. You have to rehearse now gameplay scenarios on a regular basis. Likes of Cork probably don't have time to do that. It's more about getting actually your defensive structure. But I think it's a big part of the game. Big part of the game.
Oisín, when you played with Armagh, did you have any set plays?
Yeah, we had loads of set plays, but the one set play that I think is most prevalent now for teams is if you win the throw in, that's the chance where you're going to get 1-on-1, 2-on-2. Most teams are letting it in, and I think the other thing about letting the ball in is that at some stage during the game, you need to keep that defense honest, and you need to put the big man, even if it's one ball in each half, just to keep that defense honest. I think I totally agree with Ciarán. I watch lads playing modern day football all the time who are trying to win a foot race with a defender, and all he has to do is get any sort of touch on it, and even if you win that race, you end up at the 45 or further out, and you're wheeling round and you're giving a pass back the ways. So how you become a very effective corner forward now is you have to be a lot more inventive as far as your runs are concerned. The amount of scores that people are getting just, wheeling around, coming off the shoulder. I call it the Conor McManus score, because the amount of time that he wheels around, they wait on him, and then they pop it, and he kicks it over the bar. The other thing I have noticed is that some teams are a lot more comfortable, Paul, whenever it is set up for a set play. That's something that they have worked on. Some teams actually, including Monaghan, look very uncomfortable when they're on the break. Conor Boyle, like Jack McCarron did brilliantly to hold up a ball the other night. Conor Boyle made a brilliant run through the middle, and he found himself in probably 20 yards of space in the D, and he completely panicked. There was nobody around him for him to beat or set himself or anything like that there. He just had the shot, and he must have kicked it 10 yards wide. But Monaghan are a typical example of if you set up against them, they take great pride, even just towards the end of that game where they had the ball for a couple of minutes. They take great pride in the fact that they can break you down and get that one score to get them over the line. But they don't look that comfortable on the break, which I just find amazing, because I suppose they seem very set in their ways. It's almost like they'll hold the ball up in order for the defence to get in so they can break them down, because that's what they have become accustomed and attuned to do, and that's what they're training for all the time. So I think, it's very difficult to be a corner forward. There's no point in saying any different. But there are ways to get on the ball.
You made a great sorry to cut in. You made a great point there around, so you talked about it being a bit of a foot race, but it's almost a two-way thing, isn't it? That you've your players that play with their head up and they spot that cut back in, or they spot that, sometimes you'd make a hard run right for the ball, and then all of a sudden it's timing where you just put on the brakes and you reverse back in over the top, or that, like, it's almost that your half forwards, your midfielders need to be so in sync with your runs, your patterns, your movement, that like you can't expect that, you make a hard run and then all of a sudden you cut back in and the midfielder is about to take a solo of a ball. Like, there's a number of things that kind of come into play in terms of how you run and when you make that run and how you do it. And I think it's a massive kind of, it needs to be synchronized with your head up footballers, like, your midfielders, your half forwards. And you see it all the time, like, that you're actually anticipating, where that run's going to come from or where that run's going to happen, like,
The League Sunday boys, in fairness, last night showed a great example of Ciarán Sheehan, and he had an expectation that I think it was Lahif, maybe.
Yeah, it was Tom Lahif down the left.
Yeah, and an expectation that he was going to make that run, and like when he didn't, even just for him to take his defender away, even if he wasn't used, just to take his defender, open up that little bit of space, and then it's decision time for Ciarán Sheehan. And like, who would you want on the ball trying to make the right decision? From a Dublin point of view, even if Tom Lahif pulls, his man or two men even just into that space and you kick a point, and all of a sudden you have a chance to press the kick out again. What happened? They recycle the ball. It was turned over. May go up the top end of the field. They didn't score off it, but still, do you know what I mean? Instead of just having that opportunity in and goal, all of a sudden you're recycling that ball, the stuff that people hate watching. And for somebody to make an incision again, it's more difficult because Mayo have even more bodies back. So, that's the reason why the transition has to be so quick. Do you know what I mean? Like, I watched, you'll have to indulge me for a second, but I watched Armagh play Dublin, and they played in a certain way. And when I went to watch them against Ciarán, I was fearful, and the reason why I was fearful was that I knew there'd be very little opportunity to kick the ball. They kicked the ball very, very little, but they were able to break them down in other ways. And the one thing that I would have said that Armagh, if you give me one thing that Armagh have improved on, and even getting away from defence, yes, they're definitely a bit more solid defensively, and they're not giving up as many goal chances. But their transition is incredibly quick. And I think that has been brought about by a few players who have come in who people wouldn't have necessarily rated that highly, even at club football, but have come in and just fit into that mold. And when Ciarán was talking earlier about, the pace, like sometimes I watch Cork and I'm thinking, are those half-backs playing in the wrong position? Should they be playing in the half-forward line and the half-forwards playing in the half-back line? And that might give them a chance to, might put a bit more pep in the attack and just make that transition a wee bit quicker. Because if your transition is consistently slow, it can be slow. Like, obviously, sometimes you turn over the ball, you don't have the numbers, you have to recycle it, and you have to try and break a team down that way. But if you try and do that every time you have the ball, you'll get very, very tired very, very quickly. So there has to be a certain amount of keeping the defence honest in that, they can't be set up for you all the time. And even just launching that ball in sounds agricultural or dinosaur type, but you have to keep them honest by an odd ball into the and that's what Dublin didn't do really last year during the championship. I remember them playing Kildare and they were so controlled on the ball, but it gave Kildare a serious opportunity just to nullify them or keep them out as best they can, get bodies back, and you just need to kick it in sometimes.
There is another aspect of Dublin's performance that we have to touch on today, and allowing for the fact that Mayo were excellent at times. They weren't brilliant, I didn't think, on Saturday night, but they were excellent at times, and Diarmuid O'Connor was superb. and I thought Mayo's bench was way better than Dublin's bench. And I know everyone's talking about all the players that Dublin were missing who have to come back in, but Mayo also had some brilliant players who didn't tog or weren't on the field, like Paddy Durkin didn't play, for example. But there is one aspect of Dublin's performance which I think was quite startling, and it's their defence. And Dublin have conceded at this point in the league, after 3 games in the league, they've conceded 13 points more than any other team in Division 1. And if you look across all 4 divisions, now I know some matches were put off, but it won't really change this basic fact. Across all 4 divisions, only Carlow have conceded more scores than Dublin. And that is a stunning turnaround from a team that was built on defence. They have brilliant attackers, fair enough, but their defence was outstanding year after year, and it looks done. Oisín.
Great start, Paul. First and foremost, there's a lot of work that's going in behind the scenes on that one, but it is, and you know what, a lot of times, it's obvious what the problem is, and yet you would think that having had 2 weeks, that's the big thing. I thought, having had 2 weeks to address the issues that they had, and I single out the 3 issues that I thought they had the last day. And one of the major one was defence and a little bit of help for that defence, and I think that was obvious in the Armagh and Kerry game. But like even the reaction the other night, just to maybe be a little bit more stubborn and just maybe even turn around and say, listen, I'll tell you what we're doing, lads, we're playing a full-time sweeper, or we're playing 2 full-time sweepers, because we're in the trenches at the minute and we need to find a way out of it. But while we're figuring that out, we need to not leave our full back line hanging out to dry. And they've done that now for 3 matches in a row. The lads who are playing in defence, the confidence is waning game by game. And I just thought at the weekend was the time to maybe try and shut up shop. Don't somebody turn around and tell me that, oh, that's not the Dublin way. And sometimes, like for example, they go to Newbridge next week, and it's a real test. It's a test of everything, but it's mainly a test of the characters in the change room, whether they can get a result down there. Because I've been actually quite impressed with the way Kildare have gone about things. I still think that they're maybe just lacking a little bit up front. But if Dublin are going to play like that, and Flynn's going to be playing a full forward, and they're going to be as direct as other teams have been, like the Kerrys and the Mayos and Armaghs, if they're going to be as direct, then they're in serious trouble. So I think when you're in the trenches, sometimes you just got to find a way to win, and they're at that. Dublin are at that stage now. Do you know when you're talking about, I wish the performance was a little bit better? That ship has sailed after 3 games. They got to get down and dirty and win a match. And if that involves playing 2 sweepers in front of your full back line, or +1 and +2, or whatever way you want to call it, but you gotta make it sort of a lot harder to break down. And I think those stats that you have just rolled out, Paul, verify all of that. And that.
Oisín, I think they could play 3 sweepers if they want. They can drop anything they do backwards. But if they don't start tackling in the middle third of the field, they can forget. Like, I thought what Dublin were brilliant at over the years. When we started doing this 3 years ago, the 3 of us, we talked about Dublin's skill level and how good Dublin were at the basics of the game. The basic hand passes that Dublin never ever messed up are now falling apart. Dublin's kick passing was the best in the country by a million miles. So their skill level was brilliant. Their tackling technique was way ahead of everyone else. But also, how they defended in the middle third of the field was absolutely wonderful. They were so good at slowing teams up. They were very good at stopping people taking quick frees. They were miserable actually about it, and they got away. It was quite cynical, but they were brilliant at it. And that just looks gone. And they're really so open. And this is against Mayo, who were short players and not playing brilliantly. And still, Mayo were comfortable in the end. And that's a dramatic change. So I'm not too sure it's even just structural. I think there's a work rate issue around the middle.
I agree. I think that when you're looking at structural issues, the work rate thing is a massive thing, and just maybe becoming a little bit more horrible to play against, because that's certainly not there at the minute.
Can I just touch on that? I suppose it's to be fair, watching the game, I thought the intensity, there was a fair intensity from both sides at the beginning. Now Dublin probably fell off a bit, but and I don't mean to harp on about structure, and I know you mentioned there, Paul, but what I would say is, and I got sent a clip recently around, I think Marty Clark was doing a workshop on coaching, and he talked about how the AFL 80% of turnovers were scores. I know, do you see that, Oisín? But so like I thought that's what Dublin had actually formulated very well in their team over the last. So basically, what he was saying was that when a team they shifted all AFL rules and structures because of this, because 80% of turnovers were turning into scores the opposition. So the mindset changed from a defensive point of view, that when you are attacking with the ball, that you're almost setting up defensively for the turnover, anticipating that we do actually turn over the ball. How are we set up defensively? And you've layers and you've structure behind the ball. Whereas I thought Dublin had been very good at doing that. So you always had your anchor position. It might be Fitzsimons, who kind of sits deep, always has that level of protection. Whereas against Mayo the other night, it was just, and the last couple of league games, it's just a case of you can get the ball, you can look up, you can hit that link man every time. There's no defensive structure. The lanes aren't set up. So it's like, how do we set up where we're going to turn over the ball? How do we set up defensively? Where are we going to turn over the ball? And at the moment, they're not doing that. They're not anticipating.
That's a coaching job, isn't it?
It is, absolutely it is. But and what I'd say about that is, once that's set up, the work rate and intensity automatically takes a life of its own, because you've trust that you've protection behind you, that you can actually go all out, you can pressure the ball, you can turn them over. In terms of the basic skills and stuff, that's an area that they need to improve on again. Like it's clear. Like, I'm not saying that they're a million miles off. They've been at such a high level for so long that, naturally enough, it might dip a small bit, but I just think it does play a part. That defensive structure plays a massive part in actually how you play the game from an intensity point of view, work rate point of view as well.
So the things, like, if you're thinking, Ciarán mentioned structure, along with that, then work rate, and then the other thing to address is confidence, because the majority of those guys are playing with no confidence. A lot of the young lads who have come in because of probably the criticism that you boys have given Dublin over the last number of weeks, it honestly makes it very, very difficult. I mean, young lads will know that, that there is a certain amount of pressure there, and they're very early on in their inter-county careers, and all of a sudden, after 3 games, there's a pressure to perform, and sometimes when that happens, individuals try to do something out of the ordinary instead of doing just what their job is. Go back to Roy Keane, just do your job, and that's the thing about the structural issue, the work rate issue, and then add in that the fact that there's a confidence situation that they have to address as well. So there's a job of work there, and I don't think it's something that's going to be turned around in a week. But
well, here's the thing: when your Armagh team were breaking up, and some of the players who had been in the All-Ireland winning team began retiring or slipping out, and a new generation of players coming through, how did you cope with that?
How did Armagh cope with that?
No, and you personally, what did you think?
Yeah, I just knew that we weren't replacing leg for leg. The majority of the players had been around the panel, and I would say that some of the players who come in actually improved us for a little bit of time. But when we started losing lads in key areas, you sort of knew around. I thought personally, 2006 was probably our last real chance to get the final bit out of those players who were aging, and once that was gone, I knew for a fact that there was going to be a certain period of transition. But the thing about when you're actually in the situation is that you're just trying to hold on and get the last little drop of juice out of it, and we we tried to do that, but I think by the time 06 was over, I think we were under no illusions that was.
And did you get frustrated?
Probably got a little bit disillusioned at times. Yeah, I probably, Ciarán mentions about you're making the same runs as you had done. You're just not getting on the same amount of ball. I felt that as a player, I felt that the opportunity started to dry up. So again, even as an experienced player, when I found myself on the ball, I was trying to do things. I was trying to beat three and stick in the back of the net, because that was. I realized that might be my only play for the next 5 minutes, and whereas before, the chances were coming thick and fast, and that's the beauty of playing in a team that are able to dominate around the middle of the field. And
did it breed tension in a team?
I think there was more an acceptance. I think there was an acceptance. As much as we kept pushing and pushing and pushing, I think there was a certain amount of acceptance that that this wasn't going to be the same. But we still, because when you're in that bubble, you just feel, look at, we might be different and we might have changed, but we're still good enough to compete. And I think, we were still good enough to compete, but I think, by the time it's the 06, 07 came, it was starting to drift.
If we turn, before we finish, to Divisions 3 and 4, Division 4, London are top of the table after 3 games, and I know they've hard games coming, and I know it's partly because Sligo and Cavan was put off at the weekend. But Ciarán, what's happening there with London is pretty remarkable that they've managed to push through.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I suppose we played Leitrim a couple of years ago up in Leitrim in a game that they gave it to us for the first half, like really kind of went at us. We were under pressure. It was kind of tough conditions. They're in it for a bit of a dogfight. And then when I saw the result at the weekend, I was kind of like a bit kind of surprised in many ways, but I just think it's great for the competition. There's clearly a huge amount of work going in there. And I think that's what we need to be seeing, more results like that at that level. I don't know what the mindset is around, I don't know what their goals are in terms of progressing through divisions. But they should certainly be gaining a lot of confidence in doing what they're doing. And I'd like to see that, over the next, coming years, that there is a further development investment into how they play, how they operate. And I'm kind of excited. I was excited about the result. That's how I felt. That was my emotion when I saw the result. I was a bit kind of excited about kind of where that could go. But yeah, hopefully we see more from him.
And Oisín, by contrast, Limerick, who had been on the gallop into the top of Division 3, got beaten by Louth on a day when, if they'd won, you really think that they were on the way to Division 2.
Yeah, and Louth had to reel off 7 points, the last 7 points of the game, in order to win it. I think there seemed to be a massive panic on to play that game. I think obviously Louth went down on Saturday, so there was a real onus on Limerick to find somewhere to play. They didn't look as comfortable on the 4G as what Louth did, and Louth are probably training a lot on that 4G surface in Dover, so I think that might have helped them. But there was a few changes yesterday. Louth, they went for a bit more experience, and I think as a result of as a result of looking at what Limerick had done in the first 2 games and what Louth had done, I mean, Louth going away, I mean, that's a huge result for them, and it's a result that they can build on now, because Louth have good young players coming on, but they chose to dispense of their services a little bit yesterday and went for a more experienced team and a midfielder in goals. So
they played the midfielder in goals.
Well, James Califf is a former midfielder, and I don't know if anybody's seen the press that Louth had in one of the Limerick kickouts, but he caught it, and 2 passes later, Samuel Roy was putting it over the bar. So that's what I call a press. There was nobody inside the opposition 45. So it's again, it's the way the game has gone. You have to adapt, and I know they were struggling in the goalkeeping department since Craig Lynch left. So that's the reaction they've had. Put James Califf in there. He's about 6'20", so that helps also.
If we look at next weekend, teams they've 6 days basically to get ready for what is the pivotal weekend in the league. If you win this weekend, it really sets you up for the last games. But if you lose and you face 5 games, teams are going to now play 5 games on 5 weekends, and they're on a treadmill. Ciarán, it's a massive weekend for Cork, for example.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And look, it's kind of squeaky bum time, really. In terms of what's next for this team.
Do you think Cork will be relegated?
I don't think they'll be relegated. I do think we're going to see a response after the game the weekend. They'll be up against it against Galway. There's no doubt about it. But it's crunch time then for their last 3 games. Look, I think they'd fancy their chances against those 3 teams.
Awfully. Is that what you're saying, Ciarán?
Yeah.
To come to the American Ciarán, that's not going to be easy.
I think that I think it's going to be they'll learn an awful lot. I hope they learn enough. What's important here is that they're learning from every game they play. Like the worst thing you can do is have that fixed mindset around, okay, here's where we're at. If you have that growth mindset around, where can we improve? What are we going to do next? I'll be very, very interested to see the game next weekend and how that fares out. But yeah, I would be confident that they will stay up. And I've claimed on this podcast a number of times a bit of Corkness around confidence around this football team. But yeah, look, I do. As I said, I've played with a number of them. I couldn't question their character. It's just a case of I hope that they learned an awful lot from last weekend and the previous couple of games, and we'll start to see some sort of a response.
Oisín, do you think Cork will be relegated?
I think there's a distinct possibility now. Yeah. I think the big game for you two guys is Cork Offaly. I think that's going to be. I think that's where it's going to be determined. I can't see Cork beating Galway. From what I've seen so far, so I think a lot of it will come down to Offaly and Cork.
Against that, it's really, I don't know if people have seen the clip. There was a clip of Meath against Down, which was a draw in Division 2 yesterday. It was an incredible clip where there was a line ball being taken in front of the stand in Navan just outside the 20. Someone made a TikTok out of it, actually. It was taken in front of the 20, and ordinarily you could see a left-footed kick. He was shaping to hit it towards the back post, and just when he kicked it, the wind took it and blew it out 10 meters down the sideline from where he kicked it. And it was a fair kick. It wasn't like it was a poke. And so judging teams in these conditions is really, really not straightforward. And the next couple of weeks, next weekend doesn't look like it's going to be a huge amount better. It looks like it's going to be a wet week. And the future, the whole season for teams is being decided in a quagmire. Oisín, so who's going to join Cork in relegation to Division 3, do you think?
Things don't look good for Down at the minute. So it'll be Down or Offaly. Down, Offaly, Cork, I think, is one of those, 2 of those 3. Sorry.
Oh, I think Meath are right in the mix there. It's a split division at this stage. We'll finish on that note. Thank you very much to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Tony Lean, to everyone at Examiner Sport for making it happen. A huge thanks to Oisín, and especially to Ciarán Sheehan. It's great to have you back. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back soon.
It's only the Allianz Leagues. It's only February. Only a warm-up. Only a relegation. Only a bit of fun. It's only a debut. Only hundreds of competitive matches and thousands of players giving it their all. Only an unstoppable passion for GA across the whole nation. It's only 30 years of Allianz supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues, only the Allianz leagues.
A grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads. There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to Eden, and now they're really rolling.